What is up, guys? Jake here with the next special Vainglory Hero Spotlight video. And once again, we have gotten back Flash from World Champion TeamSoloMid. Flash, welcome back, buddy.
How's it going, Jake? Glad to be here again.
Oh man, we're doing awesome. So glad to have you. Such a great response from our first video. So I can't thank you enough for coming back and doing it again for us. And talking about Catherine. Catherine for the longest time was one of the two. You had Arden, you had Catherine. That was pretty much all you ever saw. So still one that a lot of people have a lot of comfort with just because they played it so much. So give me your general thoughts on Catherine, your outlook for her on 117 coming in onto the fold.
Yeah, so she's definitely one of the oldest heroes on the Halcyon Fold for sure. Long time roam hero. In and out of competitive play a little bit. We've definitely seen her be very effective. We've also seen her be super ineffective. I'll definitely talk about it a little more in a bit, but I think that she actually has the single strongest ability in all of Vainglory, which is Blast Tremor, which can silence the enemy team for almost 3.5 seconds.
Yeah, it's insane. In my personal opinion, one of the most annoying heroes to play against. Now, I know you guys at the highest level, you can reflex block all this stuff, and you guys are awesome. But for the average player, that's not quite there for that. She can just be a nightmare because, as you said, when a team fight breaks out and all of a sudden you can't do anything besides auto attack and walk away for 3.5 seconds, that could be the end of the match for you. But before we get to her abilities and all that, one thing that I think is greatly overlooked for, again, the casual player or the average player is her heroic perk. Her heroic perk, excuse me. Tell us about what that does and how you sort of try to optimize that in a game.
Yeah, so her heroic perk is called Captain of the Guard. Basically, every time she stuns or silences an enemy hero, she gains 1 armor and 1 shield. This definitely isn't going to seem like a lot, and at the start of the game, it's basically nothing. But if a really good Catherine player is very active about building these stacks, she becomes incredibly tanky into the late game.
Yeah, no question about it. One at a time doesn't seem like what a lot, but there's not a lot of cooldown on that. So let's just go ahead and get right into her abilities. Talking about her ability, that Merciless Pursuit and her stun. Um, you see it all the time. People come in, they start fights with it. In the middle of a fight, all of a sudden you get stunned out, and on some heroes that can really disrupt your sort of your groove in the middle of that team fight. So tell us about that ability, what exactly it does, and how you sort of prioritize that in her abilities.
Yeah, so Merciless Pursuit, another really strong ability in Vainglory. She gains burst of movement speed, and her next basic attack turns into a stun. It can be really effective and detrimental to heroes who rely on channeling abilities like Scarf or Adagio. It can interrupt that and make those abilities absolutely useless. So she can use it both offensively and defensively. She can lead her allies into battle, stunning an enemy carry while all of her allies jump on top of it. Or she can use it defensively, either to just run away herself or to stun the chasing enemy team in order to save one of her allies.
Yeah, no question. This ability, and along with her ultimate, is one of the reasons I say she's one of the most annoying to heroes to play against. Because, like you said, whether you're trying to engage, you're trying to get away, it just seems like that stun is always up. She can always land it, and it's not a skill shot. It's just boom, she hits you. You're stunned out. If it's like you said, out of a scarf or maybe even like an Arden trying to drop his gauntlet, sometimes she can catch you with a stun, interrupt your ultimate, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, I've got nothing. I've got nothing for these guys now. Also, if she's trying to get away or trying to let one of her teammates get away, she just turns around and stuns you and walks off. It's pretty annoying. But it seems like all of her abilities are sort of built that with that style. Her bubble, what I call her bubble, obviously her storm guard, her B ability. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so everyone refers to it as her bubble. In the description, it says Catherine activates a pulsating bubble that burns enemies and deflects damage above a certain threshold. Basically, Catherine is super effective as a frontline for her team because any damage that she takes over this threshold is negated and deflected back onto the enemy team, and then I personally like to overdrive this ability first, and once it's overdriven, it's the damage is going to be increased by 25% that she's deflecting back into the enemy heroes.
Yeah, I get tickled sometimes. I'll be on Discord with some of my team. We'll be playing against a Catherine, and one of my teammates will be low, and all of a sudden you'll hear them screaming out, don't hit her," because they're afraid of the reflect coming back on them and actually killing them. It can be almost an offensive type. It's defensive in nature, but it can almost act offensively when you get it overdriven. That damage bouncing off starts getting to be pretty nasty. Finally, let's talk about her ultimate. You've touched on it already, but it is just an absolutely disgusting ability. Tell us about it.
So yeah, her ultimate's called Blast Tremor. She slams the ground, damaging and silencing enemies in a large cone in front of her. It really is large. You don't necessarily see the exact area effect, but if the enemies are standing in front of you and they do not reflex block it, you're going to be silenced. So that's kind of what makes or breaks Catherine in competitive play. When she lands her abilities, chances are professional players, and if she lands her blast tremor, they're immediately going to engage on the enemy team and they're going to be dead because they're going to be helpless for 3.5 seconds once this gets to level 3. It can be used similar to Merciless Pursuit, both offensively and defensively. Offensively, Catherine is going to want to use this ability unpredictably or unsuspectingly. Ideally, she uses it in from a bush where the enemy team can't see her, and then they're silenced before they even know what hit them. But that's not always possible, especially with vision and how active people are about buying flares. But you want to make sure that you land this early on in a team fight in order to get a massive advantage over the enemy team. If Catherine and her allies get caught out of position, it can also be used defensively. So she can use it just to silence the enemy team while Catherine and her allies just run away.
Absolutely. And like you said, you do see this reflex blocked quite a bit at high levels. But if it lands, the people are so good at bursting down, focusing a target. There's no question about it. Someone's going to die, and probably everyone. But if all three people they land this, they dive on a target, you're going to delete one of the carries in a matter of seconds before this even wears off. So the other team's in a really bad spot then. All right, so we've talked about that. Now, before we move on from abilities, I want to ask you, I think you've sort of hinted at it already, but which abilities of her do you overdrive? Is it always the same? Does it sort of vary depending on how the match is going? But talk to us about overdriving her abilities.
It can definitely vary. Typically, I will probably overdrive Stormguard just because the additional damage reflective is really devastating. And Blast Tremor, just having the shorter cooldown, having the longer silence duration, I think is really helpful during a team fight. But there are also situations where overdriving Merciless Pursuit makes more sense. When it gets overdriven, it does a little bit more damage and it stuns enemies for a longer period of time. I think overdriving it against heroes who have channeling abilities or things you can cancel is really important. Saw especially, you want to be able to cancel his spin up stacks as much as possible. So overdriving this, stunning Saw, being able to kill Saw, it makes a lot of sense. But going back to Stormguard, if you're going against a Kestrel, Stormguard is Kestrel's absolute worst enemy. So in that scenario, I'd definitely overdrive Stormguard instead.
Okay, that brings us into the next. That's a great segue into the next point that I wanted to bring up here, which is hero synergy and strong counters. And you've already touched on it, so let's go ahead and stay with that, talking about strong counters. And I think that's a pretty universal one for Catherine, that she's a devastating strong counter for a good Kestrel player. Is there any others that you would say, yeah, she really counters him out pretty well?
Well, like I said before, she definitely counters Vox incredibly well. Because her Blast Tremor is a silencing ability, I think that she's also mostly a counter for heroes who are reliant upon their abilities, which is most frequently crystal powered heroes like Scarf or Celeste. If Scarf and Celeste can't use their abilities during a team fight because they're silenced, they're pretty much useless. Whereas
Right.
if you silence a Ringo, it's not as big of a deal because he can at least still basic attack or basic attack while he's running away.
Right, definitely good point. Okay, then let's flip the coin. Talk about hero synergy. Who do you really like pairing her with?
So off the bat, as much as she is a counter, she also synergizes really well with Scarf. When she stuns someone using her Merciless Pursuit, it makes it really easy for Scarf to just Spitfire and Goop right on top of this target. If he Spitfires and Goops ahead of time, Catherine can even stun them so that the target is stuck in the Spitfire and the Goop for an even longer period of time. At the same time, if timed correctly, Catherine can initiate a fight with Blast Tremor while Scarf's channeling his Dragon's Breath, so the enemy team is absolutely helpless in terms of trying to get away from it. Another
Absolutely,
one,
let's say that's a terrifying combo there. When she silences, he's breathing in that air, getting ready for that fire, and she pops that war horn. It's just like, oh god, we're dead.
yeah, and another hero that she pairs really well with is Vox. It's because they both have silencing abilities, Blast Tremor and Wait for It. When used also optimally, this can silence the enemy team for 4.2 seconds, which is absolutely devastating. Vox can just go in and absolutely melt everyone while they're still silenced.
Yeah, I've went against that comp too, and it is terrifying. That double silence when it's landed correctly, you just got to throw your hands up. There's nothing you can do. And I was going to touch on a double or possibly even a triple stun combo. Now, obviously, this is not as strong as it once was before they updated it to where you could actually reflex block while you were stunned. But prior to that, you would see a lot of Jules, Celeste, Catherine, and it was just like they would lock you down with that stun and just get deleted. But is double and triple stun still a pretty effective thing to sort of pair with her?
Yeah, definitely. That used to be meta quite some time ago. I know that both Jewel and Celeste have seen buffs in recent patches to try and get them back into competitive play. Because this update is still so new, it's pretty hard to tell whether or not that's going to be a viable strategy. That meta really fell out of fashion when the ability to use reflex blocks while you're stunned was implemented, because now rather than landing three stuns chained in unison, if someone gets stunned by the first one, they can activate a reflex block to block the second one, and then the third one, there's a possibility that it'll miss. But that's definitely a strong comp for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about her items. What you want to focus on. What is your first sort of inline item you're going for when you're playing Celeste or Catherine? Excuse me.
So core items for Catherine, very similar to a lot of the other Rome heroes: Fountain of Renewal and Warhorn. Fountain of Renewal got a little bit of its utility back in 1.17. The projectile speed much faster, so it's much more effective at saving allies who are low health during the middle of a team fight. Warhorn, always strong, can be used both offensively and defensively. You activate it, speeds up everyone on your team. You can run into battle with it, or if you're caught out of position and you need to disengage, activate it and run away.
Right. Nice. Okay. Let's talk about as you said, a lot of support heroes sort of have those core items that sort of overlap and stay the same, but there are some that are situational and maybe that work better for others. So talk about her sort of situational items and maybe what sort of helps her out more so. Sort of like when we did Finn, we talked about how movement speed is really important to his kid. Is there anything like that for Catherine?
Yeah, so there's some offensive situational items and both defensive situational items. The offensive situational items kind of depend on what heroes you're playing against. Crucible is one of them, and Atlas Pauldron is the other. Crucible best utilized against teams that are really utilize area of effect abilities, so abilities that can affect multiple people in a same area in one area. So Catherine, one of those heroes, Blast Tremor, can silence three people on a team. Adagio's Verse of Judgment will hit everyone inside of that radius, and then Scarf's Dragon Breath. Crucible is also very effective against that. Atlas Pauldron, you're gonna want to build that on Catherine when you're going against teams that have a very high attack speeds. This can be either innately high attack speeds like Saw from his heroic perk spin up, or it can be from heroes who often build a lot of attack speed, like Ringo, or even Crystal Powered Adagio if he's building alternating current. On the other hand, you have offensive situational items. So these are going to be items that speed up Catherine's cooldowns. Most of the time, I'd recommend building either Clockwork or Contraption. Both these items have cooldown reduction that is going to enable Catherine to get her abilities up more frequently during team fight, and specifically for her blast tremor, so that she has it up for every time a team fight occurs. Contraption has a lot more utility in 1.17 because you cannot see what items the other team has until you have gained vision on them on the map. So being able to just place scout traps throughout the entire Halcyon fold is going to be really, really effective. If you're not as concerned about having the vision, Clockwork is just pure cooldown reduction and is also super effective.
Yeah, definitely. Her A and B have pretty short reuse times as it is. So anytime you lower those, it's great. But also, as you touched on earlier, having that blast tremor up for every team fight. When she gets to that point on her reuse cooldown, it is just it's game changing. It really is. It makes it, if she can land it, the team fight almost inevitably is going to go your way. Let's jump to quickly talking about her sort of progression through the game as an early game hero. Would you say she's strong, weak, intermediate? Are you ready to fight right out of the gates, or do you want to sort of avoid?
So relative to other Rome heroes, Catherine is definitely weak in the early game. If you start with Merciless Pursuit, the stun duration is really, really short, that it's not going to be that effective. And if you start with Storm Guard, the enemy team's just going to ignore Catherine while they focus your enemy carry. So starting passively, just clearing the jungle, trying to ensure you're getting all of your camps is going to be really, really important before you ramp up into the mid game where she starts to hit some of her power spikes.
Exactly. Touching on the mid game, you see a lot of early Catherines. They just run around, and even if they're just in range, they'll use that merciless pursuit. They'll grab that stone, and then they'll just walk away. They're not looking for a fight. They're just trying to get those stacks built up, like you talked about earlier. And in the mid game is where you sort of see, like you said, that power spike happening. She gets that blast tremor. She's starting to get her stacks built up. Do you feel like at that point she's sort of ready for a fight?
Yeah, so during the mid game, Catherine's going to hit three major power spikes. Her first one's going to come when she reaches level 6 and she unlocks Blast Tremor. Now she's going to have the ability to silence the entire enemy team, which Catherine and her allies are definitely going to want to fight around. The second major power spike is going to come when she finishes building both Fountain of Renewal and Warhorn. If Catherine finishes building Fountain before the enemy team, you know that you can go into a team fight having that huge, huge advantage, be able to heal back allies when they get super low and completely change the tides of the team fight. Warhorn, super beneficial. You can often catch the enemy team out of position or when they're unsuspecting an engagement, which is also super effective. The final power spike is going to come when Catherine reaches level 8. At this point, she's going to be able to overdrive her first ability. Most commonly, I do think that Storm Guard should be overdriven first. It creates a very short cooldown of only 4 seconds, and the damage reflected increases to 25%, making her very, very tanky during the mid game.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now let's talk about late game finally. She's got all her items, she's got her overdriven abilities done, and hopefully at this point she's got a lot of stacks built up. It seems like sometimes she's just unbreakable. She just stands right in the fight, she's stunning you, she's silencing you, and if you try to target her, it just sort of bounces off of.
Yeah, so if you're using your Merciless Pursuit effectively and efficiently throughout the entire game, she's going to build up a ton of stacks of Captain of the Guard, which is going to make her really, really tanky. But the most important part in the late game is playing around her Blast Tremor. When Catherine has her Blast Tremor, she knows she can go into a fight with a huge advantage. If she doesn't have Blast Tremor, her and her allies are going to want to play really, really passively. If you're one of the players that likes to play in solo queue, knowing when your Catherine player has or does not have her Blast Tremor is going to be really hard. So it's going to be important just to follow what the Catherine is doing and making sure that if she's leading into battle, she has it, and if she's not leading into battle, then she probably doesn't.
Great tips, man. Great tips because it is tough sometimes when you don't have voice comms to play around a hero. But she's one of those that you want to play around. You want to sort of follow her lead, and she'll give you the cues. So, man, Flash, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up for us. I'm so glad you did another one of these. I think people really are enjoying them and learning from you. Just to have some knowledge from someone at your level is just super, super valuable. So thank you so much for doing this. And as you guys can probably tell, hopefully he will continue to do these for basically all the Rome heroes for us.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. It's been a pleasure as always, and I definitely look to bringing you guys more content on Rome Heroes for the future.
Super exciting, man. Can't wait for it, especially with 2 new Romes coming out. Oh my goodness, everybody's pumped. All right, guys, hope you liked it. Until next time, Jake and FlashX doing our best to help you guys suck less.